I'm really intrigued by the idea of using drums to speak tone language, for example, Yoruba, and I studied the phenomenon very deeply. And when I go around the world, I collect images of musicians, musical instruments, uh, pictures, paintings, and this I collected from various parts of the world to explain the whole concept of speech surrogacy, as it's called, which is the use of instruments other than the human vocal equipment to speak. So that's what you see. And you see through the whole exhibition images of musicians, pictures of musicians, musical instruments. These are things I collected all over the world. Well, this happy birthday, Dr. Tunde Adegbola at 60, is a birthday card given to me by some really, really special children, the advocacy children. And there's a particularly interesting message in it. It says that Dr. Adegbola, you are one kind. If anyone should say they hate you, it is a lie. So that's an interesting sentiment expressed by some children who I am really very much drawn to children. That's the thumb piano. Now, many years ago, I used to run a games arcade, and I made efforts to model Nigerian coin. And this used to be 1 naira. So I used these coins to run the arcade machines. So I still have a decent collection of 1 naira coins. Having traveled all over the world for conferences, I make a habit of keeping my conference tags. And these are just maybe about 1/10 of the conference tags that I keep at home. More music images, musician images, and all these instruments are instruments that can talk, that can be used to speak various tone languages of the world: Gan, Dagomba, Ewe, and various other languages. And this came from, I think, my 66th birthday celebration by the Rich Network. I've been so blessed being in a church where I am highly appreciated, and there's always this effort to celebrate me when the opportunities come. It's a grace, great grace, that I don't take for granted, and I thank God for. Well, that's a picture of me and my son, my first son, when he was a little boy. And that's a picture of me. That was when my father turned 70. And one of the very, very rare pictures, because I don't like agbada. I think it falsifies your personality. So I don't like it. I like it on those who wear it, whose personality it fits. But for me, no. I prefer to be this simple. But I really cherish this agbada because I inherited it from my grandfather, though not directly, my maternal grandfather. Ordinarily, you would have expected me to inherit from my paternal grandfather, which I did, and I will show you that agbada later on. But I inherited this from my maternal grandfather through my uncle, to whom it was my uncle inherited it. My uncle, my mother's elder brother, Mr. Emmanuel Babalola Olojo, a very, very significant person in my life. Because when I was 7 months old, my parents had to go abroad for further education. And it was he that took care of my sister and I. And that bond between myself and him was very, very strong, to the extent that when he grew very, very old and I expressed some sentiment towards this Agbada, he gave it to me. And his children, who are even much older than me, had no say in the matter. So I'll show you the real Agbada later on. We have it here. So that's one of the very few occasions which you find me in an Agbada. That's my dear wife beside me, and my mother and my father. Incidentally, my father is wearing the Agbada I inherited from my grandfather, which I'll show you later on. Now, these are, Nigerians call them awards. They are actually plaques. They are basic plaques to express sentiments towards people. Sometimes overrated, sometimes just for Nigerians to express themselves. I have many plaques here testifying to my work as a teacher. I have quite a number of them talking about my students' sentiment towards me in various universities. But at the point I had to tell students to stop giving me these teaching awards, because I'm not even the member of the staff of the university. That lecturers are there and they keep giving me awards. So I said, look, it can be embarrassing sometimes. They give me these awards for best lecturer. I said, well, there's nothing like best lecturer again. And I think it's reasonable to appreciate a lecturer. There can't be a best lecturer. It's not possible. I mean, each person has something they bring to the table. Pardon? Well, there's this one from the Ogun State Television that recognized me as a pioneer engineer, because I started with them. I was one of the pioneer engineers. Maybe about 3 or 4 of us that started OGTV. Some of us came from the Ogun State Radio, and the head of engineering came from Lagos Television, Mr. Kehinde Eleshi. Really, really nice boss of mine. These are some of pictures of my family on holidays in the US and somewhere, I think somewhere in the UK, I think Wales. This is a picture I got, a picture I got for my 65th birthday. Another image of musicians. These images of musical instruments. This was special one to me, made by the great artist Imal Silva. One of my collector items. When you see any image that is not of a musician, just assume that it was given to me as a gift. If it is not related to music, I don't buy such things. I think this must have gone from maybe Kenya. This is done by one of the artists I collect by the name of Wale Dudu Giga. More pictures of my family. This is my wife and first son and my second son. And that's a picture of my last son at dinner somewhere. I think this is Nigeria, but this is in the UK. Yes, picture of another musician, though not very clear, but musician also. This is a very special one. It was done by an artist friend of mine from Sao Tome and Principe. I did a lot of work in Sao Tome and Principe, setting up radio stations. And each time I went, these artists, we met somewhere in restaurants, and he then chose to express our friendship by giving me an artwork, and I really, really cherish this because it's very, very well done. Now, this is my 60th birthday. My wife and I had some public function. 2 of my children at their cousin's wedding, and my second son when he graduated from university. The others, they are more like me. They don't do all the ceremonies. When they were having ceremony for PhD in UI, I was under the transmitter somewhere in Senegal, setting up a radio station. Well, this is the recognition from Microsoft for localizing Microsoft Windows and the Office suite. Some old camera Yashica EZ Zoom 70. It is usually said, tongue in the cheek, that globalization is when Nokia sells more cameras than Kodak, and and Canon, because these are people you know for photography. Kodak was the main manufacturer of photochemical photographic processing, and the Canons, Chinons, Yashica of this world are the main makers of cameras. But when globalization came, when the whole idea of centralization and where there's no difference between many devices just due to the Living Spring is a festival of Christian artists, music festival that holds in Ife, University of Ife, every year. And I was part of it from the beginning with people like Professor Ladi Olashono, Professor Fonsho Akredolu, Professor Fonsho Shonaya, Professor Mrs. Shonaya, a lot of people in Ife and from outside. So after 40 years of Living Spring, I was one of the 40 people that were given this recognition for supporting Living Spring at that time. It's a really important recognition for me because I spent the most of my youth, of my young professional days as a performing musician, participating in many recordings in Nigeria and even outside. So to be so recognized was really, really big for me. So that ends the first day. Okay, but we're going to go all the way down there because these are not in days. Well, still another plaque, this from my friends in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, because many years ago I was involved with the group, the Tribute Singers, which was probably one of Nigeria's first a cappella groups in the late 70s, mid 80s to the 90s. And many years after, the group came together and gave me this recognition. These are some of the old technologies that defined computing. In those days, the Amiga, Avac Media, this we used to convert video into images, and where this was what we stored information on. This is what we call the floppy disk. This were before this was what we call the 8-inch drive, and later on came this 5.25-inch drive. This contains about, I think it was 250K of memory, and after some time you could clip the edge and record on both sides, and that gave 512 from 250 meg. So these are the early means by which we stored data. Later on came the 3.5-inch drives. This was stronger. This gave, I think, about 1.4 meg of storage. And I mean, you needed lots of them, so we had cases like this on which you stored many of those disks. This is a typical multimeter that I used when I was a broadcast engineer. I showed you some coins earlier on. These were the mechanisms by which we were able to use those coins to to filter, and people can use to play games. You just throw in a coin and the thing works. Here you have a box of what we call slides. No, not slides, but this, we call them 45 RPM, 45 revolutions per minute records. This in these days, what you call MP. This was a MP3 of those days. This is how we got music played. Typical computers of those days. You have the computer, then you have maybe a disk drive here, a CD drive. This is a 3.5-inch drive. You can mount three or 5.25-inch discs, the type I showed you before here. Typical, we call them tower configuration, and with improvement in technology, we then have monitors like this. These were the kind of monitors that were typical in those days before these came. And there we have more of these tower type systems. This is a very, very special scanner. This is a scanner, because when I started work in human language technology, one of the major problems we had was that we didn't have sufficient data. I was working on Yoruba speech recognition. We didn't have enough data on Yoruba in computer readable form. Talking here, we started this thing around 1985, 86, 87 with my good friend Pastor Luby Johnson and Dr. Sheni Ogunson. And it was important to have data, so we got funding from Bethel Hikma, which is an organization set up by the late Dr. Kole Omotosho. He gave us some money to buy books and buy a scanner to scan the books, and also money to pay to develop an optical character recognizer that could recognize Yoruba text. Another tower system, typical monitor of those days. More tower systems. All these came out of my junkyard. Typical memory cards that we used in those days to extend the memory of a computer. When you bought a computer, you were able to extend the memory, and these are typical memory cards, memory extension card. Well, in those days, I'm not supposed to hold it like this without having a static arrestor, but things are still moved on, and these are more relics than anything useful these days. So that's why I'm able to touch. I'm not supposed to touch that. More traditional monitors. Now this was a early solar panel that we used for training young people, breadboard electronics, training them to build circuits. And we got a solar panel with it because we know that we might not be able to have power all the time. Now this Videonics, the company I represented in Nigeria for many years, they made domestic consumer video editing materials, but because of the situation of broadcasting in Nigeria, it was adopted into the broadcast industry, and many organizations use them. It's a typical VHS recorder of those days and player. This is the kind of thing that connected to that camera which you needed to support with the camera. Another of the plaques I got from Microsoft for outstanding contribution to the release of Windows 7 and Office 2010 in Hausa, Igbo, and Yoruba. This is the kit that came with that solar panel, and had a breadboard and components which you can connect. We use this to train young people how to make electronic circuits. Long before we had all these software-based digital trainers.